続きまして、アメリカ・イリノイ大学の教授であり、九州大学カーボンニュートラルエネルギー国際研究所、通称I²CNERの所長を務めております、ペトロス・ソフロニス教授の基調講演でございます。本日ご講演いただきます基調講演のタイトルは、Internationalizing Research Powering the Future Reforming Academia でございます。それではご準備の方が整ったようでございます。ソフロニス所長、どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。Dr. Sofronis, please.
Good afternoon. It is a great pleasure coming from the University of Illinois and I²CNER University here at Tokyo to make this presentation that will showcase our efforts to advance and foster ties between the United States and Japan on this critical issue of carbon neutral energy. Today, my talk is titled International Research, Powering the Future, Reforming Academia. The idea is to show the pillars of our WPI program here of Japan. I²CNER is a close collaboration between a prestigious institute of Japan, I²CNER University, that is an institute with world-class facilities and faculty and personnel, and the University of Illinois, which is a system, an academic system in the United States over many years with impact on research and technology. The vision of I²CNER is to contribute to the creation of a sustainable and environmentally friendly society by carrying out basic research. And I'm saying basic research that is issue-driven in order to advance systems, energy systems of low carbon emission, and also to capture CO2 and store it, and hopefully convert it into a useful product. At the same time, understanding the full scale of the WPI pillars, we try to internationalize our academic system and hopefully reform the university environment. This slide is a busy slide. It shows our vision. It is not a static slide. We advance, we change it, we readjust it. But at this stage, it shows the vision of I²CNER, and essentially, it is a list of new and advanced technologies that can penetrate the energy markets, and when, here is the time, and when, with a purpose to have carbon emission reductions by about 40 to 60% by the year 2050. For instance, down here, as you see, 2015, we have the commercialization of fuel cell vehicles here in Japan. This is a new technology that will penetrate the markets, and I²CNER carries out research here. It is a research theme in I²CNER. At the same time, you see 2030, there is going to be commercialization of this fuel cell technology, and I²CNER aims toward this commercialization, how to advance research in order to enable this commercialization. Of course, this is, as I said, a dynamic picture. Is not a picture that is static there. As our research progresses, we readjust our research program. As part of this picture, as I mentioned, is a hydrogen-powered transportation sector. So I²CNER carries out research in all areas that will enable a hydrogen-powered transportation sector. We want to have technologies for hydrogen production. We carry out research by using artificial photosynthesis here in order to produce hydrogen with zero CO2 emissions. We want to transport the hydrogen. We need materials. We need hydrogen-compatible materials. We need to store the hydrogen. We need storage materials. We need next-generation fuel cells. We carry out fundamental research. And because this is a long project, and perhaps through artificial photosynthesis we cannot get the hydrogen immediately in the short term. We want to have immediate long-term hydrogen production technologies such as coal gasification or natural gas reformation. In that case, in order to have a carbon neutral society, we need to advance fundamental research on capturing and sequestering CO2. One of the pillars of the WPI program is research. Here we collaborate almost across the world. We have research teams, thematic research areas in I²CNER that are interacting, and they include a number of faculty from all over the world. We have research on separating CO2, materials for CO2 separation. We want to understand thermophysical properties of materials. We want to understand structural materials, next generation fuel cells, hydrogen production, and so on and so forth. Our research teams are not isolated teams. They are interacting. The themes, the research themes, are pervading a number of these research areas. For instance, we are working in the area of catalysis. Catalysis is a theme that pervades for hydrogen-compatible materials, thermophysical properties, next-generation fuel cells. For instance, we are interested how can we come up with cheap catalysts so that we can go away from platinum, which is an essential component of fuel cells. So it is an interactive environment focused in these research thematic areas. We have about 25 principal investigators. These are the people, the scientists, who are driving our research. And as you see, it is an international team. In production, we have Professor I²CNER from the Imperial College London, along with our Japanese colleagues. We have in structural material Professor Kirchheim from the University of Göttingen from Germany, along with our Japanese colleagues. In fuel cells, as you see, we have Professor Tuller from MIT, Gower from the University of Illinois, and so on and so forth. Our team is truly international. And now I'm going to try to navigate you briefly through some of our achievements, some of our research projects. Of course, I cannot go all along through everything. I will give you just a sample. And of course, my colleagues later will go more in depth into just some specific areas so that you see what I²CNER is all about. We are working on artificial photosynthesis. We want to create hydrogen by using light. So what is artificial photosynthesis? Light hits some material, then it produces an electron. The electron touches the water. Water is split into hydrogen and oxygen. Hydrogen is a fuel. So in I²CNER, we investigate the properties of interfaces, the properties of free surfaces. In I²CNER, we are investigating what types of materials are best to achieve this. We are investigating devices in order to achieve this. And as you see, our teams are international here. You see here Western faces and Japanese faces. And of course, we involve both female and male scientists. Again, in photocatalytic water splitting, the roadblock is that the efficiencies today are very small, 0.1%. In order to move into technology, we need efficiencies about 10%. We are working very hard. Our team so far managed to push this efficiency here to a very good number, 2.7%. We are working by using organic photovoltaics in order to push the efficiencies even higher. We believe that we are making tremendous progress in this area, and perhaps we are the best in Japan or in the world. My colleagues at Kyushu University in I²CNER managed to achieve efficiencies almost about 6.3%. Remember, 10% is the target in order to enable technology. We need to store hydrogen. This is the world's first observation of a hydrogen atom observed through high-resolution transmission electron microscopy in vanadium. We try to understand how hydrogen is stored in materials because storage is an important issue. We need to understand how materials behave structurally in the presence of hydrogen because we need to have compressors to compress hydrogen. We need to have pipelines in order to transport hydrogen. And we already had some great achievements here, I believe. We know, we went inside the materials. We understand why materials fail in the presence of hydrogen. And we know also how to mitigate the hydrogen effect by using very, very tiny amounts of oxygen. Fuel cells, you will hear more from Professor Sasaki, my colleague, but I'd like to mention to you today here that we are working to change the paradigm here. We want to use molecular cathodes and anodes. We want to go away from the expensive platinum in order to be able to commercialize the technology. We want to use CO2, not only to store it, but turn it into a useful product. We want to take the CO2 into this electrochemical cell, activate the electrochemical cell through sunlight, and then turn CO2 either into a useful product, syngas, or into fuel. We are working with catalysts here. We need to have catalysis in order to achieve those. Professor Nakashima and Professor Kennis, again, Kyushu University, University of Illinois, within I²CNER, are exploring nanotubes as a new way to catalyze these types of activities. We are working on understanding the properties of CO2. We want to understand the behavior of supercritical CO2 when it goes underground and touches the brine. What happens at that interface? We need to understand the response of CO2 when it is compressed underground. We need to understand the permeability. Here we came to understand that the theoretical models that we have for the permeability of supercritical CO2 do not match our first experimental observations that we got at Kyushu. In other words, we need to do better in predicting the permeability of CO2. These are the types of projects that we want to carry out, fundamental research, but issue-driven. In other words, to help large-scale numerical simulations on the behavior of CO2 once it is stored underground. Again, we try to understand if CO2 leaks from subseabed storage. My colleague Ken Christensen from the University of Illinois will talk more about this. I'm proudly presenting here this result from Professor Nakashima from Kyushu University, who, working with UK colleagues in Europe, managed to get this distribution of CO2 that has leaked from an experimental facility. Fusion, as Dr. Kuroki, the program director of WPI program, mentioned, we are working trying to fuse the disciplines. We don't want to just work on our own, on our cubicles. So this is one of the pillars of the WPI program, and we try to understand how systems work together, how individual disciplines can come together in order to get an optimum product. For instance, we are working on a system here that we take, for instance, the sunlight, we take energy, we store it, and then we get the hydrogen out of the storage place, we get to fuel a fuel cell, get energy out of the fuel cell, and send it to the grid. As you see here, there are a number of systems, a number of disciplines that are involved. Traditionally, we think that we have to optimize the efficiency of an individual system, and we need to carry out science for that system. However, we have an energy analysis team in our institute that says perhaps optimum efficiency in one system is not what produces the overall optimum efficiency in the system. So we may change our research directions, and we may readjust our program where we go. All this research is carried out under a close observation by our external advisory committee. As an institute, we have an external advisory committee that reviews the institute activities, every institute activity once a month. I'm proud to show you here the constitution of this external advisory committee, headed by Professor Ronan Adrian of the Arizona State University, co-chaired by Dr. Deborah Myers of the Argonne National Laboratory at the University of Illinois. Members of the National Academy of Engineering, distinguished scientists from Japan and national laboratories. Internationalization of research, another pillar of the WPI program. And since we had the privilege to hear Ambassador Roos today, here is what he told the Japan Times on December 4, just 3 days ago. He worries about people-to-people ties, the ties between our younger generations. If younger generations don't know each other, then the bonds will get weaker. Future of bonds between Japan and the US depend on younger generations. This is what Ambassador Roos just told us a few days ago in writing, and we are responding. Young Japanese colleagues are visiting our Midwest Geological Sequestration Consortium 30 kilometers west of the University of Illinois, the biggest United States Department of Energy effort to sequester CO2. Our young colleagues are working with Dr. Finlay, who is the director of this project. Our graduate students from Illinois are coming and are working with the students, the postdocs, and the colleagues of Professor Murakami at Kyushu University. And in fact, they came up with a joint publication just this year, 2012. We have a joint publication, the Americans and the Japanese together. Our librarians got notice that there is something going on between Kyushu University and the University of Illinois. There is a great relationship that has been built between the two libraries. Those are the titles of the presentations. They have already started working into library technologies, which are beyond what I can describe here. You can read the subject matters that the two librarians are working together. Our network is international. It is not only based at the University of Illinois and Kyushu University. We have a number of institutions from Europe that are involved with us. We have VTT from Finland that already started working with us. Last month, I visited the NTNU University in Norway and SINTEF. We are now working on a memorandum of understanding between Norwegians and Japanese and Americans, because the Norwegians have such long experience and tremendous knowledge on CCS. We from I²CNER can contribute with our fundamental science. We are working with Germans. We are working with the Max Planck Institute of Western Germany, the leading institute on material development, metallic alloys in Germany. We are working with many other research centers and institutions in the United States. We are working with the Sandia National Laboratories from Livermore, California, with Los Alamos National Laboratories. Dr. Kevin Ott is a member of our external advisory committee. We are working with Mohawk Technologies, who this company is one of the leading world companies in hydrogen compression, and they work with Kawasaki Heavy Industries here in Japan. As you see, we are trying to involve the industrial sector also in an international framework, Japan and the US. We are working with China. We have from Tsinghua University and a faculty who is working with us on CCS. So our network is truly international. The WPI program is intended to open up, internationalize the Japanese university. I think the WPI program is also helping the US programs to internationalize and open up. For instance, the Sandia National Laboratories has created the so-called Livermore Valley Open Campus, which is an open campus where somebody can go and work and interact just by his or her own ID. This is an amazing. Two major United States laboratories, Sandia National Laboratories and Lawrence Livermore Laboratory, are opening up and creating an open campus. And of course, Dr. Sommerday is the head of our structural materials division, a laboratory a scientist from this laboratory to head a division at Kyushu University. This has never happened before. It is the first time that it has been happening for the United States. So Dr. Kuroki, the program, the WPI program, affects the United States also. We are working and carrying out symposia. We are active. Last year, we had a symposium, Powering the Future, at the University of Illinois, where everybody from Japan was en masse participating in this symposium, and we had many distinguished speakers from national laboratories, from government agencies and industries that they spoke about future of carbon neutral energy and what academia, what institutes like us can offer in order to advance our objectives. We are in close collaboration with the United States Department of Energy because, as Ambassador Ruz mentioned, this is an effort that can only succeed by leveraging resources internationally. So I²CNER has aligned interests in establishing a network of excellence with United States national laboratories. Since the occasion here is to showcase I²CNER, please allow me to brag a little bit about I²CNER. Since I'm directing this promising institution, we are growing in visibility. We are attracting people at Kyushu University. Kyushu University is becoming a focal point for carbon neutral energy. We have data, for instance, for FY 2010, Hydrogenius, which is an institute that preceded I²CNER, had 1441 visitors. 2011, we almost doubled the international visitors at Kyushu University. As you see here in the pictures, I can show here our friends from France, our friends from Norway, our friends from Finland, and of course, Dr. John Kahn, a Kyoto Prize winner who visited us for a day. A wonderful day where Dr. Kahn, one of the leaders in material science, spoke to our young researchers about the life of a scientist. I think it is this culture that we want to instill in our environment around Kyushu University. We carry out outreach. We want to approach the society. We want to talk to the younger generations about the profound beauty of creative thinking and marvels. We expose ourselves to high school students. And of course, I ought to say that we were honored by the Crown Prince Naruhito, who visited Ito campus, and as you see, he fuels a hydrogen-powered vehicle here. I want to close by talking about the future. Again, we are a very young institute. We are almost 2 years old, right? But it is always great to think about the future. What comes next? Dr. Kuroki mentioned that I²CNER may be supported for after the 10th year. The idea is to think always what comes next. And we already started this discussion, and I would like to say that sustainability is another component that an energy institute ought to consider. For instance, this is an example of sustainability with regard to materials. This is the periodic table, for instance. The green boxes show elements that they are used in photovoltaics. For instance, indium is an element. Indium is produced by zinc refining and sputter deposition process, which is 30% efficient, and the supply that we have is about 70 years only. this supply is not long if you consider that a new element, when researched, it can be introduced in the market only after 20 years. So there is a gap between basic research and technology. So as we work for our elements, for our materials, for our organic photovoltaics or inorganic photocatalysis, we need to start thinking sustainability, what it takes to come up with a new design. In other words, we need to somewhat in the future think it is not only to optimize performance, we need to think about recovery. In other words, we need to think if indium is used, how we can recover it after the component's life expires. And this is a very important issue. For instance, as you know, rare earths are very closely related to energy. For instance, this is data that I have for the United States. Rare earths are all imported to the United States. So when we consider the energy issue, right, disruption of supplies is a factor that we need to consider apart from CO2 reduction and so on and so forth. So rethinking the design paradigm, not only optimum performance of photovoltaics and energy application, but optimum recovery of materials. This is sustainability. And of course, Japan is extremely interested in this area because, as you see, Prius is full of rare earth materials. So this is the current thinking of I²CNER. As I told you, we are in a dynamic institute. We are thinking what will come 10 years down the road. And I would like to close by putting this wonderful building here, as you see. This is the I²CNER building, the new building that is going to be ready in January 29 when we have the opening ceremony. And I would like to invite all our distinguished speakers today to participate and help us celebrate the opening of this building, which will bring us together. It is important that we are all together under the same building so that we can talk, because ideas, the new ideas, are bubbling up, are coming up from chalk talk discussion amongst the scientists. I thank you very much for your attention.